Hi everyone. The purpose of this video is to provide pragmatic information to people who are new to Ultima Online. I've been playing Ultima Online for about almost 2 months now, and my goal with the video is to tell new players information that I wish was available to me when I first started. This will not be specific, like do this, do that, how to do this, how to do that. My goal is to make it more like a high-level overview type of video. My first piece of advice for a new player is to join the Discord server by clicking right here on the Ultima Online Outlands homepage. Ultima Online is a very old game and does not have functions that modern MMORPGs have, such as general chat and trade chat. So the Discord server is where most communication and trade and commerce occurs. Now that you've joined the Discord server, the first thing I'd recommend you do is to navigate to the guild's recruiting channel over here on the left and browse the guild advertisements and try to find a guild to join. Joining a guild will be the most useful thing for you as a new player, much more useful than watching this video and listening to me. Your guildmates will be able to help you learn the game, and they'll probably also fund your starting activities to get you on your feet until you can earn a decent living for yourself. The server is quite populated. I think it's the most popular Ultima Online private server. It might even be more popular than official Ultima Online servers, so there are a lot of different guilds to choose from, and I just scrolled past this one. The new player guild is geared towards players who are new to Ultima Online, such as yourself, but it is not really necessary for you to join this specific guild if you don't want to. There are a lot of guilds that are very friendly and helpful to new players. The next channel in Discord I'd like to draw your attention to is the new player channel. For any specific questions or any questions at all, you can ask them here, and people will be more than happy to help you with whatever you need for the most part. Especially this group of players over here on the right, the companions. These players have been recognized by the server owners for their willingness to help new players, and all of these people are very knowledgeable about the game, and they can offer advice far beyond my abilities. Also, don't be afraid to ask in the general channel. Typically nothing of importance is being discussed in the general channel, and people are more than willing to help you out if you want to ask in the general channel as well. So the next aspect of the game that I'd like to discuss is commerce, and mainly how a new player should do due diligence to avoid being taken advantage of. So my recommendation is that before you buy or sell an item, you should first either ask your guild, assuming you've joined one, what it's worth, or try to transact within your guild. Secondly, perhaps ask in the new player channel or ask a companion how much they think the item is worth. The third option is just to look at the trade history in the buy and sell channels by using the search function to look at the historical prices that people have been advertising. All three of those options would work. My main advice would just be to not rush into a deal and sell to the first person you see advertise that they want to buy or sell something. And one main thing that you should look out for when using these channels are people who post simultaneously in buy and sell, trying to buy items in bulk for low prices and then sell those same items back at the same time for higher prices. These people are typically buying for far under market value and selling for over market value. The next related thing I'd like to discuss are in-game vendors. As you move about the map, you'll likely see these NPCs that have yellow names that seem to be advertising stuff. You can simply double click on them and then left click on the items to see what they are and what price they're asking for them, and you can buy them directly onto your character. So my recommendation for dealing with these vendors is to always compare the price that they're asking against prices that are listed in the Discord server, because it's very common for these vendors to be selling items for far over market value just due to the convenience of being able to buy them immediately rather than having to deal with another person in the Discord server. Okay, now I'd like to give you an overview of the 6 main templates or classes that I think you should pick from when starting Ultima Online. And I've already typed them here, and this is the Ultima Online lingo. So when you refer to these or have questions about them in Discord or for other players such as companions, they'll know what you're talking about if you say these template names, I suppose. Okay, let's get started. The first one is a Dexer. A Dexer is basically a character that uses direct damage with either ranged weapons or melee weapons. And the key distinction of a Dexer is that a Dexer actually takes damage from mobs. So I'm going to type that here. Okay, and then by contradistinction, the other 5 classes do not take damage from mobs. And that sounds silly, but I'll explain in a second. Okay, so a Dexer has no skills or abilities to stop the monsters from attacking the character directly. So it has to tank the damage and use healing to survive. Okay, let's move on to a Bard with Dex. So a Bard is basically a Dexer, but it uses Bard skills also. And what Bard skills do is it uses a musical instrument that you get in the game to apply a stun mechanic to the mobs. And the stun duration is actually longer than the cooldown of the skill, so this effectively makes a Bard able to perma-stun a mob and therefore take no damage. So I'm going to type that. Let's move on to a Dexer plus a Tamer. So just to repeat, a Dexer uses either a melee weapon or a ranged weapon, and then a Tamer will tame creatures from the world or from a dungeon, and those creatures can draw aggro from the character and then tank the damage for the character. So uses pets to tank damage. Okay, moving on to a Shadow Archer. A Shadow Archer uses stealth and can fire from stealth and then can run away and re-stealth and repeat that process to kill a monster without taking any damage. So fires from stealth, mob cannot retaliate. Okay, moving on to a Mage plus a Tamer. Same as a Dexer plus a Tamer, but they would use Magery for damage and utility instead of using a melee weapon or a ranged weapon. So once again, uses pets to tank damage. And moving on to a Summoner, which is a form of a Mage. It's basically the same as a Mage plus a Tamer, where it uses Magery for damage and utility, but it would summon the pets instead of taming the pets. So once again, uses pets to tank damage. Okay, so my recommendation is that you should pick one of these 4 on the left to start with. So I'll say recommended to start, and then not recommended to start. Right. My reason for saying this is because Majory costs a lot more money to level up than these four. So to level up these four, all you would need is a weapon, which is very, very cheap. And then for leveling taming, you would need bandages. So, which is also very cheap. In contrast to level Majory, the current estimate is that it costs roughly 60,000 gold to max Majory. So unless you're going to be donating or you join a generous guild that will help you out with that, you're probably not going to be able to level up Majory very effectively when you first start out. So the most common recommendation I've heard from most people is to start as a bard as your first character, and there are many reasons for this. First of all, a bard is one of the 5 classes that does not take damage from mobs, and this trivializes PvM content to a certain degree. It allows you to skip ahead to more difficult mobs than a starting Dexter would be able to handle, just based on the fact that they have to tank the damage themselves. The second reason a bard is recommended to start is because, unlike the other classes, they have almost no startup cost. So to use the permastun ability, all it takes is a little bit of time training your bard skills up, which costs no money to do, and then you can play the class to almost its full effectiveness with no investment, almost no investment. Another reason is because the bard's gear costs almost nothing. So all you would need is a weapon and a musical instrument, which are very cheap. And that way, if you die, then it doesn't really matter because you can just replace your gear very easily and it doesn't set you back very much. So the most common recommendation that I hear is for a new player to start as a bard and then use that character to make money to fund other characters that you would like to make in the future. Okay, so next I just want to give you a couple of random tips, I suppose. The first is this website, exploreoutlands.com, and this is a map of the Outlands server. This is the one that I use. This is the one that I know. I think there are others, but I don't remember what they are. So basically you can just press this menu button and you can see where the towns are. You can see where all this stuff is, and it's very useful. You can scroll in very far, actually, to a very fine detail. Scroll out. It has coordinates where your cursor is, which correspond to the coordinates in the game on the map. So this is a really useful one. You can figure it out. It's just a map. The next tip that I have is where to find a public ruin book library and also a training dummy. So from any moon gate, you can go through the moon gate and go to the outpost moon gate. And here you'll find a public ruin book library with many different locations that you can teleport to. I'm not going to cover how to use ruin books in this video, but it's not difficult to figure out. You can ask in Discord or consult a different video. Inside this house is a publicly available battle trainer. So as you can see, all of these players here are attacking the battle trainer, and this will allow you to raise your combat skills even while AFK. So the next thing that I'd like to show you is where to find a preloaded rune book with useful locations. So if we go back through the moon gate to Horseshoe Bay, and then we run south, which is down left, just a little ways down the road, we'll come to this house right here. And if you look at the vendor on the bottom right, there's rune books here that say pre-marked cities and dungeons. And I already have it, so it looks like this, except I removed one. I don't remember why. But this is very useful to have a rune book with all the cities and all the dungeons so your character can get around very easily. One thing that you should be aware of is that when you first buy this, it wouldn't be blessed. So that means that you should put it in your bank box until you can afford a blessed deed for this. So you see how mine says blessed? And that means that when I die, it will remain in my backpack, and also it cannot be stolen out of my backpack. Okay, and then the final tip in this section is where to find cheap starter gear. So still in Horseshoe Bay, let's say, so from the Horseshoe Bay Moongate, it would be south down the road. From the interior of Horseshoe Bay, it would be the west exit. So now I'm going west on the road, and just a few steps outside of town, there's a wagon here by a famous crafter on the server. And this is a publicly available repair bench. So to repair your gear, you can just stand next to it and double click it. And then these vendors have very cheap gear. So a complete plate set for 1800 gold, very good deal. Leather sets for, that's studded. I guess he's sold out right now, but he restocks this pretty much every day. He's a really dedicated player. And then cheap weapons. Just 188 gold for an exceptional weapon. And this should be really all you need to start out with as a bard or a dexter. Okay, now I'd like to discuss how to deal with the numerous unidentified magical items that you'll find when you're farming in a dungeon. So you can make a character specifically to identify magical items, or you can buy a wand that will identify the items one use at a time. But if you're lazy like me, the best option is to buy a container identification wand. And this wand will identify all the items in a container at the same time by targeting the container. So if you go this route, it's recommended to save up a bunch of magical items and then identify them all at once for efficiency. And you should be able to find wands for less than 200 gold per use if you look around on different player vendors. So once you've started farming for gold in a dungeon, you probably already noticed that there are people with red names who come in and try to kill you and take your items off your body. So my goal in this portion of the video is to outline a strategy for how to avoid dying to them. So generally speaking, we can describe a dungeon as a linear path leading from the entrance to a boss room. So we'll say that this is the entrance here, and then this is the boss room here. And then the dungeon typically has multiple levels separated by a staircase or staircases. So we'll say level 1, and then a staircase, and then level 2, and then a staircase, and then level 3, and then the boss room, right? The cool thing about this server, or Ultima Online in general, is that there are gates dispersed throughout the dungeon that you can escape into. So when you enter a dungeon, you start here, right at the entrance, and then you would proceed through it to whatever area that you feel comfortable farming in. A player killer would start the same way, where they would start at the entrance and then proceed to try to find the people who are farming to kill them. So that means for you trying to survive, let's say you're here and you see the player killer coming to try to kill you. In this case, it's better if you actually run deeper into the dungeon as opposed to trying to go through them back to the entrance or the gate behind you. It's better to go deeper into the dungeon and then find a gate deeper in the dungeon to escape from. So I'm in a dungeon right now, and I'll try to illustrate this. Okay, first I have to figure out how to get out of stealth. I was just sitting here. Okay, so let's say I'm farming mobs right here, and then I notice a player killer has entered the dungeon to the bottom left and is coming to try to kill me. Now, if we look on the map here in the bottom right, you can see that there are 3 gates behind me and also the player entrance to surface behind me. So my recommendation is that instead of trying to run through the player killers back to the gates here to escape, my recommendation is that you run deeper into the dungeon. So I would be running away from the player killers instead of through them, down to the next level, down to level 2 here. Once I reach level 2, I would try to look at the map and identify the gates that I can run to escape. So in this case, I'll just pick one. I'll go this way. And then I would proceed to the gate that is deeper in the dungeon and use it to hopefully escape from the player killer before they're able to kill me. Now, I should briefly note that there are items and potions that will enable you to survive more easily. For example, there are potions that will let you avoid collision with monsters, and there's an item that will let you teleport a short distance, and there are potions that will heal you and potions that will cure poison, and there are items that will negate paralysis spells that player killers will often try to cast on you. I'm not going to cover specifically how to use these items. For that, you can consult the Discord server or other YouTube videos. Okay, next I'd like to go over common drops from monsters that you'll encounter while in a dungeon. Some of them are not very valuable and you should keep farming until you find something else or you hit your weight limit in gold or whatever. Other ones are very valuable, and when you find them, you should immediately proceed to exit so you can avoid the risk of being killed by a player killer or stolen from by a thief. So let's start. An arcane scroll is worth about 1,000 gold, so not that urgent for you to leave. A master crafting diagram is worth about 25,000 gold. So when you're first starting out, it's probably useful for you to leave the dungeon and secure this in your bank or somewhere so you can secure that gold. Same with a skill mastery orb, worth about 25,000 gold. It's probably useful for you to leave immediately. An aspect core, the price of these can vary, but usually they're not more than 20,000 gold. Some exceptions are a command core would be worth more. If you find a command core, I recommend that you leave the dungeon. But you can tell the prices of these by looking in Discord in the buy and sell channels. A lantern. Lanterns are very valuable, but I think that they are blessed when you pick them up, so not urgent for you to leave when you find a lantern. Carpet dyes, not worth very much, I think. Maybe on par with an arcane scroll. Plant chemicals, worth almost nothing. Skill scrolls, now these can vary greatly between less than 10,000 and upwards of 30,000. So the most sought after skill scrolls are animal taming and animal lore. So if you find one of those, I recommend you leave the dungeon immediately. Maps, these also vary depending on the level and what type of map it is. But if it's a treasure map, level 3 or above, I recommend that you leave immediately and secure it in your bank. So these things called ruins, I don't think these are worth very much, and I don't recommend you pick them up unless you have a house with a lot of storage space. And then magical items, they would be unidentified for you, but typically they're not worth very much, and you would just be recycling them anyway into arcane essence. So when you find unidentified magical items, it's not urgent for you to leave the dungeon. And lastly, I'd like to talk about decorative items or appearance altering items or clothing items. Oftentimes when you find an item like this, it's worth a lot, probably more than any of these. So examples of this would be hair dye, facial hair dye, articles of clothing like shoes or boots with different colors, all usually really valuable. And if you get one of these, I recommend that you leave the dungeon immediately and secure it in your bank. Okay, now I'd like to talk about just the game in general and options and macros and scripts. So it's pretty obvious when you first start the game that yours will look different than what you're seeing on my screen right now. And also, if you've seen streams on Twitch or other YouTube videos of this game, theirs will look different also. So when you first start, you should take the time to set up your user interface to something that feels comfortable for you. Okay, and moving on to options. Another thing that you'll probably notice is that when you start the game, it will load the classic UO client, but it will also load the Razor add-on. I call it an add-on. I don't know what it's supposed to be referred to, but basically there are hundreds of options in both of these that are disabled by default for whatever reason. So my recommendation is that you thoroughly review all of the options in both the client and also Razor add-on to see if there are any that would benefit you. And there are definitely other YouTube videos that specifically cover options that are good to have. I'm not going to go into it, but you'll figure it out as you go along. The next thing I'd like to discuss is scripts and macros. So Ultima Online has a large ability to automate or script actions in the game. And a lot of really good players use this to their advantage. So in a normal game, you would never expect for you to be able to create a script where you just press one button and then your character will train its skills from the starting point all the way up to the maximum level without you having to touch the computer at all, right? You would never expect to be able to press one button and then your character would teleport to the bank and then put away all of the items that you found while farming and then withdraw the bandages and potions and gear or whatever you need to go on your next run just with one press of a button. You wouldn't expect to be able to continuously loop a script that would detect if your character was under a paralysis effect and then automatically use an item that would free you from that paralysis effect. So that's just 3 easy examples of things scripts can do for you. And I recommend that you ask other players in the Discord server for tips on scripting and macros, because I would even go so far as to say that veterans who are good with using scripts are playing a completely different game than the average noob UO player. Like, there are people on this server who use scripts to play with 3 accounts at the same time that all work in tandem, in coordination to accomplish certain tasks. So if you have the patience and desire to learn how to use scripts and macros effectively, it's probably the most beneficial thing that you can do for your efficiency within the game. Okay, just some closing thoughts. I know this video didn't have much in the way of specific or detailed guidance, but your resources for that sort of material would be the Discord server, the forums, or other YouTube videos or Twitch streamers. Hopefully you were able to derive some value from this video, and hopefully I was able to give you a decent overview of what's going on this server and maybe some ideas of how you can proceed efficiently at the start of your UO career.